Due to his girlfriend's betrayal, college student Wang Ming sank into sadness. During this period, he was accidentally involved in a series of conspiracies and contacted the occult witchcraft society. Ming was accepted and became incessantly stronger with each enemy that emerged from the depths. The story begins with legends, saying that the good poison originated in 10 million mountains. This poison at the time of its spread was considered the most feared weapon of war due to the loss of many lives. Its use was even suspended, but the war did not end with its disappearance. Many years later, the source of this poison was discovered again. A lonely guy sits at the computer desk and thinks about his abandonment due to his depressive state. There is a mess and mountains of garbage around him caused by himself. The guy is very angry and says he lost this life. A certain girl asked him to pretend to be the father of her child, and in return offered a large sum of money. This girl's name was Ching, and the hero was pretending to be the father of her child. Of course, he would like to know who the real father is, but in the end, it's just a business for him. This guy is our protagonist named Ming. He lies in bed thinking about how useless he was for the Fey girl to have left him. Suddenly, a new message came from Ching asking him to go with her for an exam tomorrow. This was the 5th time in a month that she asked him to go to the hospital with her. The next day, he and the girl went to the hospital. Ching turned to the protagonist and said that he could go because she needed to go back to class. The month was not over yet, and he had already gone with her to 5 medical appointments and did not know why the girl needed all this. Ching was still pregnant and went to class. She feels that Ming is still looking, so she turns sharply to the young man. Then she sighed strongly and moved on. At the same moment, the protagonist shifted his attention to the crowd of people who were standing next to him. The young man was curious to know why they were together on the street. Then he walked over to find out what the crowd was discussing. Someone in the city had taken the life of an innocent pregnant girl, and there were poisonous insects crawling everywhere. When she was found recently, the cases of homicide increased in the city, and many of the victims were pregnant women. The attacker was very cruel, and the residents of the city of Guanda were advised not to leave after 10 at night. At first, the protagonist thought that maybe he should write to Ching about this incident, but soon realized that he shouldn't interfere. At that moment, someone was kidnapping Ching. The aggressor grabbed her and pulled her into the car. Ixing didn't even have time to do anything or scream because the attack was incredibly sudden. Meanwhile, a familiar girl passed by the protagonist and greeted him. The young man ends up meeting his ex named Faye. The protagonist started to get seriously nervous because he accidentally met his ex. Then Ming asked the girl how she was. Faye smiles and replies that she was fine. After that, the girl warns that Zhang has set up a classmate reunion, then asks if he could participate. The protagonist was surprised and wanted to know in more detail about the meeting of his colleagues. But soon the young man replied that he was busy. The girl noticed that she didn't even say when the meeting would be, and he already gave the excuse that he was busy, as if he was ashamed to meet with them. The boy could only answer that it wasn't that. The girl who was in front of him lowered her eyes and apologized. During the apology, the protagonist said that it was his fault for not having enough for her. Suddenly, someone behind puts his hand on Ming's shoulder, telling Faye that she should have left him sooner because the young man didn't match her. The protagonist quickly recognized this voice being Zhang's. Immediately after came a crushing blow directly on the protagonist's face. The red-haired man was pleased to have managed to defeat the boy in just one blow. Then Zhang claimed that he tolerated him enough, and if it wasn't for the girl, he would have broken him before. At that moment, the protagonist, overcoming the pain, raised his head and asked if they were now a couple. The girl looked at him arrogantly and admitted that she left him for Zhang. The man stepped on the hero and said that he wouldn't have become friends with him if it wasn't for Faye. They used to meet behind the protagonist's back for a long time. Ming met Faye at the university and worked 3 jobs to support her. The young Nem had time to study and so couldn't graduate from university. Ming also couldn't find a normal job. Meanwhile, the reckless man mercilessly beats the poor protagonist. Zhang believed that Faye was blinded when he met Ming. Suddenly, someone stopped the aggressive guy. Faye asked him to stop because Ming could sue him for assault. After hearing the girl, he stops. Zhang could calm down but gets angry every time he thinks about the fact that Ming is Faye's first boyfriend. The girl also added that Zhang is right, then says that she should never have had a relationship with the prota, because they are from different worlds. The girl reveals that she wanted to leave the hero for a long time, but she felt sorry for him. So she kept her relationship with Zhang a secret until graduation. The protagonist, lying on the floor, asked her not to say anything else because he already understood everything. The upset guy literally begged her not to say anything else. The protagonist, trembling on the ground, tried to get up and succeeded. As soon as he succeeded, he shouted that he hated the girl for doing this to him, but the answer was only silence. Ming, beaten, sighed hard and saw how the happy couple walked in the distance. Ming promises to make them regret what they did to him. The main character, after everything that happened, decided to call a taxi. The taxi driver handed the boy a cigarette and noticed that he was terrible. so he suggested going to the hospital. The silent young man slowly began to reach for a cigarette when suddenly several messages arrived on his phone. Ching sent the hero a certain red envelope and wished him prosperity, happiness, and good luck. The protagonist only replied to this envelope, and soon after another message arrived where the girl asked to save her. The protagonist did not understand why she wrote and what exactly could have happened to her. A moment later, Ching withdrew his message, and it was deleted. Night quickly fell in the city and events continued to take place. In an unknown tall building, a tied-up and kidnapped girl sits and cries. In front of her is an unknown man with a cloak under him. There was a kind of mystical sadness that shone with a bright purple light, and in the man's hands there was a bell. Meanwhile, the protagonist was lying on his bed and keeps trying to sleep, but something is disturbing him. Suddenly, someone kicked the door with all his might. The door opened and the silhouette of a man could be seen on it. The man was wearing a suit and sunglasses. The horrified protagonist asked who it was. The man came into his field of vision and burst into the room, then pointed a gun at the hero, threatening him. The gun went off and Ming fell on the bed. The mysterious man took the young man's body and dragged him to the car. The hero survived and was tied up. Someone poured cold water and the young man came back to his senses. Ming shuddered and was shocked by what was happening. Soon a woman stood in front of him, observing his behavior. Ming only had doubts about who this woman was and why he was still alive. The boy thought he had been pumped with tranquilizers and had lost consciousness. Suddenly a scorpion was crawling near his leg. The furious girl didn't want to stand with the insect and crushed it immediately. After that, the girl wanted to know if the protagonist was a father from Ching's son. Ming responded negatively by saying that they only had business partners. Even though this was the case, the girl claimed that the protagonist was unlucky, then asked to pick him up. Two men dragged the prota somewhere. It was clear on their faces that they were some kind of assassins or agents. The men were waiting for the elevator to take the hero somewhere. Soon the elevator door opened and Ming was horrified to see that there was a girl sitting at the altar, and around her there were many dangerous insects. The mysterious man in a robe sat near the altar and performed some kind of ritual. At the same time, the girl stood still and made no noise. Many insects surrounded the innocent girl. The men brought Ming to the room and he remembered the announcement about the pregnant missing girls. At that moment, the man in the robe continued to look at the hero and wanted to say something. He asked if this was the guy who impregnated Ching, but the girl replied to the Grandmaster that the outcome was temporary and that the lunar eclipse was already beginning. The man says that Ming spoiled his most valuable victim, so for this he will pay with his soul and life. Suddenly an unknown object began to block the moon. Ming began to shout that he did not sleep with her, and this child was not his. The young man begged to stay alive. But it did not matter to the terrible people why the lunar eclipse had already begun. The Great Master was going to finish creating King Gu. The girl noticed that the sarcophagus with the king began to light up, and the chains on it began to rattle. The chains began to break easily as the sarcophagus moved. Soon all the chains were broken and nothing else prevented it from opening. The lid of the sarcophagus opened and someone was standing on it. The girl watched in horror as was happening and began to cry. Ching saw that her father was in the sarcophagus. The sarcophagus contained the body of the king of the underground city, King Malong's father. The Grand Master pointed his finger at the people and ordered the king to eliminate them. With the speed of light, the king began to run towards his targets and was about to destroy them. The underground king jumped several meters into the air to launch an airstrike against the agents. With a strong knock, he fell directly on the men's heads. The protagonist couldn't believe what he saw. He didn't understand if it was true, or it just seemed that the girl who once worked as a master took a pistol to defend herself. She had her eye on the king and was about to shoot to protect herself. A moment later, the bullet flew right next to Ming and he was even more scared. The girl didn't believe that Ching's father would return. Several other agents joined the shooting and started shooting at the master and the king. The bullets flew over the hero's head and he covered his head with his hands. Still horrified, the girl hit the Grandmaster several times with shots. Then she began to observe what the Grandmaster would do. Suddenly they saw something terrible. The bullets that hit the Grandmaster did not hurt. They only left holes in his clothes. Because of this, the master only began to laugh. The terrible man grabbed with cold hands the hand of the girl who tried to resist. But the Grandmaster, with just a movement of the hand, managed to break the weak girl's arm. This obviously caused the girl a lot of pain, but she didn't even think about stopping. With the help of her skill, she managed to hit the man in the chin with her knee. A moment later, a hidden knife was already in her hands, and she wanted to use it to hit the master. But the terrible master managed to dodge. The girl still managed to leave injuries on the man, because the knife was incredibly sharp. Then an unknown liquid began to flow from her body. It was dark and similar to oil. The same liquid hit the girl squarely in the eyes and caused severe pain. She could not see anything, and while holding her eyes, she fell to the ground. The master, swinging from side to side, began to move to destroy. All those present, the men who were on guard, saw that they were facing the biggest problem of their life. The master asked them to accept the sacrifice. Meanwhile, the terrible underground king tried to attack Ming. The mummified king grabbed the innocent by the throat and began to squeeze him. Suddenly the king caught the hero and began to drag him somewhere. The master had already prepared a cauldron containing an unknown brown substance. The protagonist was dipped in an unknown substance and his whole body fell into a container with liquid. After that, the terrible master took the guy by the head and began to lower him completely into the liquid. The protagonist was almost suffocating because he could no longer hold his breath. The master and the king performed the ceremony and asked the protagonist to rebel. The master of darkness lifted Ming's body and he did not move. After that, they immediately threw him to the ground. Ming, showing no signs of life, fell to the ground. Suddenly he opened his eyes and thought why he was such a loser. At this moment, the Grandmaster began to pronounce words in an unknown language. He continued to perform the ritual and the pupils of his eyes were absent. Only the whites of the eye were visible. Once again, the Grandmaster took a Ming by the neck and began to laugh loudly. The young man's body began to change gradually. The veins in his neck began to protrude. A moment later, he was sitting on the floor again, wondering how he could get out of this situation. The protagonist soon realized that he needed to get out and escape, but the Grandmaster did not give him that option. He grabbed his leg and said indignantly that the young man used this ritual to control the body, and now he also wants to escape. Ming shouted that he would run away anyway. At that moment, the protagonist hit the bald man with all his strength and knocked him down. After the blow, his head simply disappeared. The rest of the master's body asked the underground king to eliminate Ming. The protagonist clearly did not expect such a turn, and suddenly the king appeared behind him. The man wanted to grab Ming, who quickly started to run away. A moment later, the underground king still managed to get the fugitive out, and he started screaming furiously. The main character still managed to escape the villain's clutches and started crawling to the exit. The master's head was on the motionless ground. They made eye contact and the head began to move. The master shouted that Ming was a disgusting. Then the head wanted to bite him to take revenge. Merciless Ming hit the head with all his might and thus completely neutralized it. Finally, the protagonist managed to get up. He saw Qing tied up and wondered if he should save her or just run away. Ming was a person who only thought about himself and had no reason to save someone else, so he started to head to the exit. But soon a strange sight appeared before his eyes again. An unknown insect appeared in the room and began to fly in the air. The main character entered his field of vision, and the evil creature bit the guy on the leg with all his might. Ming began to scream loud from the frantic pain, and he didn't understand how this could happen. Due to the pain, he fell to the ground and started crying. Some time later, Ming felt better and breathed a sigh of relief. Continuing to reflect, he gradually began to stand up. Suddenly, a snake began to crawl out of one of the jars that was standing in the room. The guy realized this and was visibly nervous. He was worried that a huge snake was approaching him and would probably bite him. The giant snake ran straight at him and tried to inject his venom. Ming saw a huge snake open its mouth to make a bite, and suddenly, it was as if some spirit appeared near him and began to protect him from the creature. The protagonist did not understand what had just happened. An unknown spirit penetrated directly into the snake and began to move directly over its body. So at that moment, the mysterious spirit saved the hero from the bite of a merciless snake. The protagonist continued to look at the snake and wonder if it would attack him again. The snake suddenly rose into the air, and then something flew out. It was the same insect that was already heading towards the hero. Ming, seeing that an innocent creature had destroyed the snake, began to fear him. The young man feared that now it seemed like it was his turn. The insect began to fly again at incredibly high speed. The protagonist, to prevent it from entering his body, covered his mouth and nose with his hands. The flying insect began to closely examine the guy's actions and did not like it. The fact that Ming did not want to let the insect enter his body made the dangerous and unknown creature fly quickly. The protagonist realized that his business was bad. The creature flew between his legs and found a place where he'd enter. A moment later, there was a loud scream that could be heard even by people who were not in the building. The girls who were previously unconscious woke up due to the crying of the main character. He cried and screamed in pain because the creature managed to enter his body. Meanwhile, the girls tried to run away while the prota was distracted from pain. Ming continued to roar and shouted that he had been dishonored. The shocked girls saw the hero running from one side to the other. The girl decided to neutralize the prota and kicked him in the head. He immediately fell to the floor, and soon after, the dissatisfied agents began to enter the room. As soon as they saw everything, they were worried and perplexed by what happened. One of the men addressed the girl, calling her boss. The girl could barely stand up, and one of the men grabbed the girl to prevent her from falling. The girl replied that it was all over. The boss covered Ming with some kind of cloth to hide him and continued to say that it was all over. The boss warns that Qing must be taken and the other agents must be ordered to clean up. The man heard her and took Qing. The guy didn't realize that someone was lying on the ground and stepped on the young man's hand. The protagonist began to scream furiously because he felt a lot of pain when his hand was stepped on. Despite the loud screams, the girl was still unconscious and did not move. However, a fight began to occur and the agent landed the blow. In an unexpected dispute, the agent knocked the protagonist into the pots from which the snake had previously crawled. Ming lay on the ground and thought about what to do. Then he pulled out some sharp object and hit the agent. The blow passed right next to the man and injured him anyway. The man dodged and said that Ming looked like a professional in this fight. The protagonist ordered the man not to approach. The agent retreated and Ming pointed in the other direction, telling the man that there was a butterfly there. Losing his vigilance, the man turned to look at the place where the guy was pointing. At this point, the protagonist had already started running towards the elevator to get away from here. The professional agent noticed that the hero is very fast compared to ordinary people. Ming still managed to get into the elevator along with some unknown book. The young man, breathing a sigh of relief, began to hurriedly press the elevator button to go down. The elevator door began to close little by little. Suddenly, a knife that had been thrown by someone and began to enter through the door. Ming managed to dodge it so that the knife could not hurt him. This knife was thrown by the agent to neutralize the hero when he was in the elevator. The knife still managed to injure the protagonist and hit him directly in the shoulder. Ming continued to hold the book he had stolen from the crime scene. This was the Heavenly Book from King Gu's archives. Arriving home, the young man immediately decided to take a shower, surprising him to find that he had no knife wounds that hit him directly in the shoulder. Everything that happened an hour earlier seemed just a dream. And also his body began to change gradually. The knife cut is already healed and there is not even a scar left. And that beetle that crawled on his body was somehow connected with this book. Upon opening, the hero discovered a bright light that appeared. After the discovery appeared unknown symbols that were extremely difficult to decipher. Ming was surprised to find that he could really understand what was written here. Out of fear, the young man threw the book away, without knowing what was happening to him. Analyzing the situation, he still did not find an answer to all the questions he had. Meanwhile, the creature in his body was sleeping. The protagonist, realizing that nothing could be changed, decided to act. But suddenly the book closed on its own, not giving the hero the opportunity to meet him. A moment later, he completely ignited and began to burn strongly. This surprised Ming and he started to get nervous because he obviously didn't expect it. All that was left of the book found were ashes, and the guy never managed to get acquainted with it and read it to the end. But finally the protagonist was able to read that this book said that the beetle that crawled on his body is the golden goo. The golden goo is one of the strongest beetles of this species. Any form this beetle is the most powerful of them. And it is very difficult to grow. It requires putting 12 good upper-level insects on a special vessel, causing them to bite each other, and then they are buried for a year. In the end, only one will survive. In addition, these beetles are even rarer than common beetles. After thinking about everything he read in the book, the guy decided to act. Sitting at the computer, he did a Google search. He decided to search for information related to the good poison. It is known from legends that a long time ago the good poison originated in 10 million mountains. When the poison flourished, it was the most terrifying military weapon. This information began to cause concern in the hero. A moment later, a new message arrived on the young man's cell phone. A guy named Huey said he knew what had happened and pointed out that Faye was unworthy of him. In addition, the friend offered to see him tomorrow. The message he saw also caused a wave of emotions. The protagonist began to think about how to get revenge on Faye and Jean. The protagonist's wounds have already healed. Although he has many unresolved problems, he received incredible strength, which made him incredibly happy because he understood that he could do a lot with his power. Meanwhile, the beetle was sleeping in a sweet dream, but soon the beautiful insect woke up and the main character's stomach began to growl loudly. The creature wanted to eat. Lying on the bed, the boy realized that he had not slept all night and his body was still full of strength. The protagonist got out of bed and thought about visiting a person. He had so much energy that he clearly could do more things. So he took the cell phone in his hands. He remembered something. The young man remembered Ching and the common business they had. Due to the recent clouding of his mind, the protagonist began to torment himself. At that moment, the protagonist decided to call a Hui. The guy picked up the phone and asked his friend how he was. Ming replied that he wanted to borrow money from him. The friend exclaimed that he was shocked because Ming hadn't asked him for a loan from the moment they met. The protagonist didn't ask for money before because he knew before that he couldn't return it. The worried friend still asked him not to explain and say how much he wanted. Ming decided to ask for $1 million at once and asked if his friend could give that amount. The comrade immediately agreed and responded positively to his request, but still this did not console the hero, and he continued to smoke nervously in his room. A few seconds later, $1 million arrived in Ming's bank account. The young man, after receiving the money, got ready and left. Arriving at the store, he wanted to buy a card and a cheap phone. The saleswoman offered a card for $18 a month, and also a Huawei 999 phone, which the best in this price category. Without hesitation, the hero decided that he would take the phone and the card offered, but first he decided to create a new account on social networks and then pretend to be a girl to attract Zhang. The The protagonist believes that the guy would definitely fall in love with it. Half an hour later, he was matching Zhang. Ming was happy because his idea worked. Zhang wrote first and greeted the possible beauty, asking why she added him as a friend. The protagonist firmly decided that he would not stay at the ceremony with this scum and would treat him as he had treated the guy at the time. A moment later, the fictional girl received a new message from Zhang. He wanted to know if the fictional girl wanted to look at his abdomen, and then sent a nude photo of himself. Ming with the disgusting sight through the cell phone. Meanwhile, Zhang smiled, saying that he could not be fooled. The guy noticed that the girl had no more posts, just an attractive photo from the internet. This meant that it could be a hoax created by someone the guy knew. Zhang starts saying that if it's Faye wanting to test him, then he can't let her have control over him. The guy said that she's just his toy. But if this is another girl who is afraid to use her main account to lure him and uses a fake one. So he was very lucky and sure that he had already made her happy enough. Meanwhile, the protagonist tried to move away from Zhang's nude photograph. At the same time the boss was in the hospital with an injury, a man was in front of her and was about to tell her something. The woman asked the nurse to leave and he obeyed. The stranger's gaze and the nurse crossed and he patted her savings. Soon the door closed and the agent reported to the boss that Ching had not yet woken up. In addition, the doctor did not find any problem, but his condition was not the best. The boss was interested in symptoms and seemed to know what happened to the girl. The man confirmed the guesses. These symptoms were similar to that of the Goo Master, who didn't survive. But now they have to find another master to wake Ching. The boss asked if they still had time for it. Apparently there aren't many good masters left. But more and more matches have been happening lately and all the victims were women. The agent goes on to say that according to the cases, this was caused by Master Go. But he is not even alive. This meant that there was probably another master around, although the agent did not know his purpose. According to the brothers' research, these few nights were not peaceful, and also most likely the other masters have bad intentions. The man says that everyone will be screwed soon, and they need to get rid of all the masters. The boss also understood that only Master Gu would help get rid of the masters. His strength was superior to that of an ordinary person, and the boss said this based on her personal experience. The agent was visibly nervous when he remembered what happened in the room with the protagonist. The girl also informed her that with the help of her brothers they can monitor him carefully, and if something happens they need to inform her immediately. After that she wants the protagonist back, and also get Ching out of the hospital, because the doctors will not be able to cure her. The man agreed with the girl because she was really right. Meanwhile, Ming sneezed and thought that someone was remembering him. Now he needs to dress appropriately to meet his classmates. The young man can't let Faye and Zhang look him down. Sometime later the hero wore a very nice suit and looked amazing. The friend called saying that they were already in the car and wanted to give him a ride to the hotel, but the protagonist asked not to do it because he was going to call a taxi. Meanwhile, his companion wanted to help him spy on the right people. At this point, Ming had already called a taxi and was about to leave when Zhang sent messages again. Zhang said he wanted to meet the girl fictional. Obviously, the protagonist would not refuse and asked Zhang not to leave until they met. A few minutes later, the hero was already at the meeting place. He was greeted by cheerful companions who began to approach him. The guy also observed his two friends, Fetty and Hui. With a smile, Fetty wanted to know why Ming didn't contact him after the situation. He even thought that the young man had disappeared. Fetty asked not to embarrass the guy because he didn't do it on purpose, and besides, they had just met a group of comrades. The men were about to enter the room. There were already a lot of people there, including enemies who were sitting and waiting for the new arrivals. One of the girls noticed that the carefree trio finally arrived and asked them to sit down quickly. The slightly embarrassed boys sat at the table and were about to eat. Meanwhile, Zhang was sitting with Faye and looked at Ming. Fetty wanted to ask the protagonist why Faye was sitting with Zhang, but Hugh understood that Fetty shouldn't say that. After a while, one of the classmates stood up and greeted everyone. She said that each of them graduated a few months ago, and this is their first date. The girl says that Zhang will pay for everything, then asked them to thank Zhang. Everyone started to get up, but the friends and the prota stayed seated. The girl turned to the protagonist and wanted to know what was wrong with them, and why they didn't have any education. She says that first they were late, and now they don't show any respect for Zhang, who paid for all these luxurious dishes. Hui told her that everyone had already graduated, and she didn't need to behave like before and scold them. Moreover, it was she who invited them and even begged them to leave. Hui says that out of respect he came, and also says that he came here to be a greedy dog. If she had told him previously that coming here meant being a dog, then he would have brought a poodle. The woman, after hearing Hui's insults, almost ran to the scene, but Faye calmed her down and asked her not to attack him in front of everyone. The girl concluded that Faye was right. She says that Ming never deserved Faye and only Zhang was worthy of the girl. This made even Zhang smile, and he invited everyone to toast his health. After drinking a glass of wine, he promises to solve any problem. Soon most of the classmates agreed to drink and they raised their glasses. Suddenly, Zhang approached and turned to Ming. He wanted to bow to him with that glass of wine and apologize. Ming just smiled and wanted to hear his apology. Zhang again turned to the guy and regretted that Fei was now with him. At that moment, the guy made an announcement to all the colleagues. He says that maybe some of them don't know, but he and Fei are really in love with each other and have been together for quite a while. The arrogant gadded that they were afraid that it would upset Ming, but everyone knew that Ming was really poor. They waited until they graduated to tell him about it. Zhang says that he did it because they thought that Ming would be able to study better and eventually find a good job, but they didn't expect that the young man would not even be able to graduate. Zhang said that the protagonist should not worry about finding a job, and if it depends on him, the guy will help him to get one. Zhang says that he made this statement so that everyone can live together without problems. Then he asked no one to be offended. The short-haired girl was delighted with his words and exclaimed that Zhang is very wise. The other classmates also wanted him to take them with him and wanted to obey him. Fei said excitedly that the last time Zhang promised to help him with competitions did not work out. At that moment, the protagonist drank wine, and then, with all his strength, put the glass on the table, which caused some wine to spill. Ming turned to Zhang and said that if he really loves Fei, because he was called husband by someone else. Zhang continued to look at the main character, afraid of the boy revealing about his flirtation with another girl. The people present also didn't understand what was happening here and continued to look at Zhang. The stunned guy wanted to know if it was really Ming who wrote to him. Afterwards, without answering anything, the hero just continued to look at the man. Ming added that the more seductive his photographs, the richer he becomes. A moment later, Ming turned on a presentation behind him where he wanted to show the photos Zhang had sent. On the screen, he showed a screenshot that showed a photo of the guy flirting with a girl. In the messages, all the classmates were baffled by this because they didn't expect that Zhang could cheat on his girlfriend. Zhang continued to observe everything that was happening with his mouth open, and Fei looked at it with horror and shame. The angry boy decided that he must regain his dignity and take revenge on Ming. So soon the man began to make excuses to his girlfriend and asked to listen to him. He says that he really made a mistake and would never do it again because he loved. Zhang was on his knees in front of the girl and admitted that it was his fault, and added that like any man he makes mistakes, but asks for forgiveness. The girl with short hair approached Fei, saying that Zhang admits his mistake. She says that the man has so many ambitions and so many girls dreamed of being in her place, so the girl needs to deal with betrayals. At that moment, Zhang realized that his enemy was pretending to be a girl to seduce him. The classmates kept saying that Zhang really could change. At this moment, Fei decided that she forgave her beloved and asked him not to do it again. Soon the naive girl clung to the man because she believed it was too difficult to find true love. The protagonist's friends were amazed and said that these women would accept anything for a rich dog. Rich people are so deceitful, and couldn't look at it anymore. Meanwhile, Zhang continued to watch Ming closely and was soon planning to take revenge on him. A moment later, Fei and Zhang kissed. The protagonist and friends watched all of this and were surprised by what just happened. Ming suddenly asked if Zhang knew where the girl's mouth was until a while ago. Hearing this, everyone was perplexed. The protagonist kept saying that the girl loved to put something in her mouth, and even so Zhang kissed her with so much passion. Ming meant that he really admires him as Zhang licks all the remains of his lips. The guy wiping his mouth shouted that Ming was an idiot. The guests were even more shocked because they didn't expect this to happen. Zhang was enraged, wanting to end the main character. A woman continued to watch this and realized that Ming had gotten into trouble. No one had ever seen the guy so angry, so everyone concluded that Ming's poor fate was doomed. Even the Huey concluded that the guy had gone too far, and the other friend Fei kept watching everything that was happening and cried. The protagonist repelled the attack and insinuated that Zhang was too slow. Ming was on a completely different level, and he could repel anyone's attack. Zhang grabs a chair and starts attacking Ming, but the guy easily dodged this attack because he was already behind the enemy. A second later, the protagonist hit Zhang, and he fell to the ground for the first time, screaming in pain. Zhang continued to endure Ming's blows. The short-haired girl didn't expect it and was surprised. The onlookers didn't understand what had happened and how Ming was able to defeat the dude. No one expected this from a simple and quiet person. Even his friends understood that he had become stronger, as if he was a completely different person and had come from a martial arts temple. Moments then, Fei slapped the protagonist because he hit her boyfriend. The hero reacted to this neutrally and asked not to doubt him. Fei shouted and called the hero an idiot. She says that first he insulted her and now he is fighting Zhang. She didn't want people like him to exist and also wished for his end. The guy wasn't stupid because when they started dating, she found someone richer, and now she wants him lifeless. The girl, after hearing his words, believed that she would also be beaten. But as soon as he wanted to say a word, someone was behind him with a chair and hit him. It was a former classmate who wanted to calm the guy. Turning, the hero felt murderous intent and hit the insolent man with all his might so that he wouldn't dare to attack again. Soon the boy asked if anyone else dared to attack him. or if everyone was afraid, Zhang had just come to his senses. He and Fei looked at the hero and were afraid. The arrogant guy started to be afraid of the hero and asked him to stop because he was going too far. The protagonist knew that Zhang is not stupid enough to think that he will not want revenge. At that moment, Zhang realized that Ming really wanted to beat him. The man would never have thought that this could happen. Meanwhile, the protagonist stomped the guy facing the ground with his foot and asked if he really thinks that being rich gives him the right to humiliate someone. Ming says that no one could help him now. Meanwhile, Fei continued to watch everything that was happening. Zhang begged the girl to ask Ming to let him go. The confused girl didn't understand what to do and started crying. Ming was serious and asked to beg or he would finish off Zhang today. After all, he is just a poor and miserable man. At that moment, Zhang asked his girlfriend to beg him and agreed to all his demands. Fei, surprised, began to beg the boy to let her lover go. Suddenly, the protagonist turned to the girl and said he would only let the guy go if she kept him company that night. Zhang didn't care and asked the girl to promise. Fei, embarrassed, continued to watch and thought about what to do next. The man continued to shout that she would promise because she was the kind of woman who did everything, and in this case there was no point in pretending to be innocent. The shy girl began to speak little by little, but the hero interrupted her, saying that he was refusing because he would not take again what he had already thrown away. Now everyone present was frightened by the girl's attitude. The incomprehensible crowd continued to watch and only the hero's friends smiled. After that, Ming told the security guards that the people who were inside broke the tables, so it would be better if they arrived quickly, otherwise they destroyed everything here. Suddenly, Zhang shouted that she wouldn't let him leave, but the girl called the security service, saying that the people inside had serious problems and destroyed the whole room. Going out into the street, the friends started to ask what kind of fly had bitten him today, and why he was so enraged, as if there was a completely different person in his place. The protagonist said that they were forced to survive in this cruel world and he just beat up the people they offended. Huey said that now Ming should be more careful because Zhang would look for an opportunity to take revenge on him. Furthermore, his relatives were dangerous people. Fetty suggested that Ming was faking it before and his family got rich and his grandfather is the richest man in Dubai, or else he sold his soul to the devil, and his surname is actually San. Ming immediately hit his not-so-smart friend on the head and asked when he managed to read so many novels. Suddenly, someone behind started calling the main character. There were several people in suits and sunglasses. The hero asked his friends to relax because there was nothing to worry about, and he wouldn't let them hurt them. They took him away, and they could leave. The protagonist asked people to wait because he needed to say goodbye to his friends. One of the agents smiled because this guy was very smart and had heard about justice and not dragging his friends into their problems. Ming had to go and he advised his friends to leave too. Ming promised that he would contact them later. The friends sensed that he was nervous and maybe had some problems, so he didn't want them to get into it, and they should listen to him and pretend to leave. Meanwhile, the hero thought that as soon as his friends left, he would immediately be able to escape. The young man continued to observe the agents who had arrived for him. One of the men appeared and was happy that they had finally found Ming. At that moment, the protagonist asked if he could refuse, but the man replied that he had no choice. At the same time, the guy felt that his shoulders were about to break and he couldn't move. Judging by the big guy's face, the young man was nothing to him. The man also added that it really wasn't bad, and that he didn't even scream thanks to his manhood, and would still give the guy an interesting choice. Then Ming asked what choice he would have. The choice was that, if he didn't listen to him then, this gun would shoot at him. Soon the agents behind him grabbed the hero and started dragging him somewhere. The agents pointed their guns at the boy to stop him from doing anything. The observant man noticed that his friends had enough courage to sit on the tail and follow the car. The protagonist decided to turn around to see if this was indeed the case. Fetty thought it was the same gangsters he was talking about, and it seemed that Ming had somehow provoked them. The chase pleased the experienced agent. Meanwhile, the agent named Xiao Wu began to change the gearbox to immediately increase the speed. The agents yelled at his brother not to do this, but Ming was still calm and thought that he still had a chance to escape. A short time later, the car was traveling at a speed that none of the passengers stopped moving. After all, the car with the hero traveled down the track and absolutely overtook everyone else except Ming's friends who were driving their own car. The car continued traveling along the highway at great speed, but soon Wu warned the hero that they had arrived. The speed made everyone feel bad, and they started foaming at the mouth of shock. The strong agent dragged absolutely everyone because they couldn't move on their own. Wu notified the boss that they had brought Ming. This was the same girl who was present when the hero received a power, and she knew that the young man was lucky. The protagonist replied that the last time the woman captured him, he almost left, and now she was talking about luck. The girl replied that just because of the golden goo, the last clan of sorceresses was almost destroyed. And now the golden slime recognized him as his master and he dared to call himself unlucky. The girl added that also just because of the golden slime, the rest of the masters are already coming here. The woman knew that the beetle was already in him and he should have felt the changes in his body. but she says that Ming was not so far from leaving. Suddenly the hero raised his hand and exclaimed 100 million. The girl didn't immediately understand why he said that. Ming continued to look at the lady and said that they have already kidnapped him and almost eliminated him. So even if he says that the price is 1 billion, it is still little. The girl couldn't believe he was talking to her like that and asked if he knew that he was just pathetic compared to them, and so they could crush him at any time. Agent Wu rubs his fist while threatening the young man. But the guy was cunning and asked not to threaten him because it wouldn't work. He revealed that before coming he was afraid for his own safety, but he had just lost the ability to resist. After all, they didn't even beat him, and that's what shows his advantage over them. And that's why the hero was so important to them. The protagonist, looking at the agent, seriously asked for 1 billion, otherwise he wouldn't cooperate with them. The woman admitted that she seemed to have underestimated him, but nonetheless agreed to the deal. Wu was surprised by the hero's cue, because it was more than the man himself. Ming, watching them, concluded that the rich were so decisive, but soon realized that they needed to get closer to the discussion. After putting out the cigarette, the lady admitted that Ming was now the owner of the golden goo. However, she explains that if he does not train the beetle, the young man will not resist. No matter how the goo is in his body, there are a few things that need to be done. One of them is to help Qing wake up. The protagonist didn't understand how this could be done, but everything was in order and the lady simply asked to listen to her. At that moment, she asked Wu to send him to the shower and change his clothes. Wu immediately grabbed Ming by the throat, and the young man asked him to be more careful, because now he is a billionaire. Meanwhile, the woman arrived at Qing's room and stood close to her. Soon the hero himself approached to help the girl wake up. He wanted to know what to do. So suddenly the boss took a knife out of his pocket and slightly damaged the hero's skin, so that the red liquid began to flow from him. Ming started to drip this liquid directly into the girl's mouth. The boss says that the hero has become the owner of the goo and now his liquid can heal Qing. Agent Wu also noticed when he took the hero's hand that his hand had healed early and the liquid was no longer coming out. Half an hour later, Qing was still lying in the hospital bed. Ming asked to let him go because he had already received 10 wounds in 30 minutes, and he would not tolerate it anymore. The woman asked to let him go because she wanted to see how he would do it. Moments later, the agents had already released the hero. The boy immediately ran up to the woman and shouted that if he didn't hit her, then he wasn't a man. The boss was not simple, and she easily defeated the protagonist. This is because the protagonist still had a great lack of physical skills. His strength was simply useless. This seriously angered the hero, and he was ready to fight. Then summoned the same golden goat, who was already angry because his master was being attacked. At first, the guy wanted to know where the goo came from, but then he realized that it didn't matter and had to buy time. Pointing his finger at the girl, the hero asked if she was afraid of him and his goo. This really scared the agents, and they watched the insect with apprehension. Goo in turn also looked at people and was ready to attack them at any time. The woman, with surprise, realized that the hero could control him. Meanwhile, Ming laughed, feeling strong, and asked if the woman liked this performance. Then said that if she begged him, he would let her live. But if that doesn't happen, then in this case he will put his golden goo on the girl. After a few seconds, Goo decided to attack the girl. The protagonist, a little worried, realized that the little insect had really obeyed him. The girl, to try to protect herself, took a defensive stance and was ready to take the attack. But suddenly the dumb insect broke through the roof and flew out. Certainly no one expected this, and they looked at the hole in the ceiling. Ming thought it was all because he called him baby and now he flew. The guy didn't know what to do. At that moment, the angry agents hovered over the hero and wanted to take revenge on him for his tricks. Strangely retreating, the hero began to make excuses that his baby would soon come back and he was just playing. The girl, watching the hero closely, asked him to be more serious because the golden goo had just flown away. But the guy immediately started denying it, saying that she just went to get some fresh air. At that moment, behind the hero, her jeans were torn. Realizing this, the girl decided to help him and ordered them to bring a new pair of jeans. Now Ming was harmless and considered the agents as friends. He says they should take care of each other and solve the problem together. A moment later, someone started to enter through the ceiling. It was some dark entity that fell to the ground. The agents immediately realized that something was wrong. This began to make Wu suspicious. Meanwhile, Ming began to get even more nervous. Suddenly, a man in robe appeared in front of them, and he wanted to receive the divine secret box. The protagonist immediately realized that the book that disappeared was the secret divine. Agent Xiao Wu took out his pistol to protect himself from the newcomer, but the unknown man began to use his black magic on the agent's hand. Soon after the use of the magic, the pistol seemed to disappear from the agent's hands, and then the woman herself entered the fray. She threw the knife straight at the unknown person, and quickly the knife itself began to dissolve into thin air, disappearing before her eyes. The unknown person again ordered that the divine secret box be given to him, and also said that he would not repeat it a third time. The protagonist jumped in front of the stranger, telling the master that it was the agents who stole the divine secret box, then said that these were the men in black who even kidnapped him. The agents, hearing all this, concluded that the hero was simply a liar. They were not from the men in black, and they had not seen the secret box. The man noticed that no one could escape from here and ordered the divine secret box to be returned. Then the man said he could feel the protagonist's goo. Ming was surprised by such identifications. He stood there paralyzed, but soon shouted to the master that no one speaks like him. So if he were in his place, he would not agree. The unknown master was discouraged because his master had never taught this, and he wanted to know what would happen now. The protagonist, observing the master, concluded that this guy is stupid. Meanwhile, goo was already flying somewhere nearby, and the master realized that he could lose it soon. He thought he had screwed himself. Dark magical abilities surrounded him as if creating an aura. Suddenly that same goo was already next to the dark master. Out of nowhere, the dark dust began to appear, and goo began to suck this dust into himself, thus destroying the dark master as an entity. The small insect was able to defeat an adult man alone. Ming very happily began to smile, because his baby was back. After that, he also came to the conclusion that he had just saved the lives of the agents, and now they already owed him 2 billion. These words angered the woman, and she noticed that he had almost betrayed them. He even tried a friendship, but that's because his golden goo wasn't around. The protagonist thought that if it had taken long, he wouldn't even be alive. The woman smiled and added that the territory of the Goon and Jiang clan is not so stupid. They have no contact with the outside world. In other words, they are pure, but for her they are still disgusting. In her world there are no rules or restrictions, so they will do everything to achieve their goal, and the protagonist said that the secret box was with them, so the boy almost finished him. Then the girl hit her knee on his stomach with all her strength. When the hero opened his mouth, she threw a kind of black pill. A moment later, he had already swallowed it, and wanted to know what they gave him. The boss says it was a poison, and if Ming does something outrageous again, he won't be able to get the antidote, so a liquid will pour out of all his 7 holes in his head, and start to eat away at him. The boss adds that in addition, his dignity will also decrease. The protagonist became even more angry with the agent because of this, and the woman asked him to be obedient. Suddenly, the hero began to lick the woman, and she immediately became. He moved away from him in shock and wanted to know what this guy was doing. Ming reveals that he actually has the secret box book. After receiving goo, he learned everything in the secret box, and he now knows all the secrets. Ming said that now the girl was infected with goo's passion, so the girl must immediately fall in love and be attracted only to him, and will not want to harm him. The lady couldn't believe his words that this kind of goo really existed. Wu wanted to acquire the same book. Sometime later, the hero went to take a shower. At that moment, he realized that he felt strange. Meanwhile, the lady also took a bath and considered the hero an idiot. At that moment, the protagonist was thinking that he needed to invent something so that this beetle did not leave his body all the time, while the girl thought that it was impossible to fall in love with Ming. The Book of Secrets said that goo's attraction was top-notch, and he couldn't understand how quickly they could do it. The lady meanwhile resisted and thought she shouldn't allow herself to think about this guy. She says that thinking about him only makes things worse. Meanwhile, the protagonist says he can fool her once, but not for a lifetime, so he will have to study the secret box that is supposedly in his brain. At that moment, the girl looking at his hand knew that his bones had not been completely restored, but in appearance it seemed that they were almost there, and this guy was not so useless. Immediately after the shower, the hero began to cultivate his skills, and the girl together with the agents was approaching his room, after which she ordered the agents to open the door. When the door opened, the protagonist realized that he had already used saliva and her hand had healed his saliva. The girl, taking out a cigarette and lighting it, noticed that this master could return at any time, and she wanted to know how much of the skills prevailed in Ming. At the same time, the guy realized that he couldn't give in, and it was time to act. Ming began to deny, saying that he was not her father, and she should turn around. This answer annoyed the girl, and she asked her not to forget that they were in the same boat. The protagonist says that his useless life is not comparable to hers, and no one can save her but him. But the girl also had an argument that had already given 2 million, but it was still not enough for him. Pointing his finger at the woman, he said he wanted money, and he wanted her too. A moment later, the girl had already put out the cigarette, and she said she promised him, but only after he solved the problem with the master. Sighing strongly, the guy understood that if he hadn't done it, she would have seen it right through him, and he had to learn fast. After leaving the room, the girl approached one of the agents and asked to come in with her. CIA agent Wu was immediately outraged because the protagonist was giving such disgusting conditions. The girl also finds him full of ego, and said that the agent needs to listen to him first, and after they use him they will discuss his fate. The girl says that Wu must follow him carefully and also give him 5 billion. Agent Wu, after hearing this, understood that the boss never allowed men to take advantage of her. Soon after the man ordered the agents to open the door, the protagonist was happy and wanted to know where his money was. Agent Wu, holding a bank card in his hand, said that there were 5 billion. As soon as the hero took the card, he immediately invited the man because he wanted to take it with him on an exciting journey. But this only confused the experienced man because they had to do something more important first. The hero turned to his brother again and asked if he wanted to learn that trick with Gu and said he could help him. The man replied that he knew more about nightclubs and above all he preferred long-legged girls, or maybe someone more exotic. He also knew an innocent student couple. The agents were shocked by the fact that the man walked with Ming as if nothing had happened. When approaching, an agent said that Master God did not resist, accompanied by a total of 4 people. Nan Miao calls them gods, respectively as Demon God, Magician, Zombie God, and Monster God. A short time ago, Master Go was eliminated, and his secret divine treasure box disappeared. After thinking for a while, the man concluded that the eliminated was a magical god, the most skilled in magical goo. In other words, the target of the living will be living beings such as animals and plants, just like humans, and the purpose of a goo will be gold, wood, water, fire, and dirt. They can control 1,000,000 other objects. Realizing all this, the man was shocked that he could distinguish everyone so easily, but the woman shut him up because she wanted the hero to finish. The protagonist kept saying that based on their names, the eliminated must be a god of magic. Master Gu, who attacked them, can control insects and weapons, so he should be a god of monsters. Ming says that if he is not deceived, the ghosts of God should be able to create smaller ghosts. But then the demon god, which is considered a type of medicine used to treat diseases, is one of the main ones, so he is an angel or else he is a murderer. The lady noticed that the protagonist apparently didn't know, but the demon god is the youngest among all. He is not aware of the power, and they called him a demon because of his appearance. Soon after, the lady wanted to know how he connected with the divine secret box. The boy replied that it was burned, and could not say anything about it. But the girl asked what was inside her. Ming replied that inside the box there was the same good attraction. Agent Wu started shouting to take him with him, and the girl thought he was a fool. Sometime later, they met in a nightclub in the company of several girls. The man wanted to know when his younger brother would finally teach him about Gu attraction, but the protagonist wanted to know if Han would give his money. Upon hearing this, the man didn't immediately understand who the guy was talking about, but soon started laughing because he believed that Ming was like otherworldly and really mastered Gu. Xiao Wu added that the richest boss in this city is Mo, and now he is not in the city. Meanwhile, Chief Hong is in charge here. The protagonist wanted to know if that means that if he starts dating Chief Hong, then he will become the man's boss. Laughing, the man hugged the boy to himself and said that he was still too young, then decided to give him a little advice. But Ming clearly didn't like it and asked if the man had forgotten that he could also infect him. Suddenly, the man called the protagonist Big Brother, and from that moment on wanted to call him boss. This pleased the hero because the man really wasn't that stupid and asked him to just call him brother. Ming starts to leave because it was time to go to work. Meanwhile, Agent Wu watched the guy from behind and a smile was visible on his face. Sometime later, they came to an unknown man who was lying on a bed. Now they are working honestly together. The protagonist noted that he had already healed, but Hong's hand was still not good, so he will try to take care of it. From that moment on, the hero knew that he was already the owner of the divine secret box. Then he gave the information on how to control the soul of a zombie. This pleases the girl, and she wanted to find out if it was true. Hong asked the agent to get her a bowl of clean water, a bowl of black dog liquid, and her willow branch. Sometime later, all the ingredients were ready. The hero dove and spat on the black dog's liquid, after which a bright star appeared in front of him, and he used his golden boot directly on the zombies. Goose started drinking the black dog's liquid. As soon as he finished it, he immediately hid in Ming's body. That surprised the guy because he clearly didn't expect this. Seeing all this, the girl wanted to know what would happen now. The guy simply used the power in his body to summon the king of all, and now he knows where to find the person they were looking for. In fact, the protagonist lied but pretended to be completely calm, and the agents were surprised, asking what kind of person they were looking for. The protagonist speaks that his search showed him the way, and he ordered Agent Wu to go with him and Hong to prepare the money. The agent was happy to go with the guy, but the girl was upset because the hero only needed money. On the way, the protagonist said that this master could not only solve Hong's problem, but also help them fight against the other masters. The agent doubted it for a second, but the hero said that in this case he would have to believe that his baby was the king of millions of goo. That being said, the boy also thought that the agent looks like an idiot, but behaves sparingly. Otherwise, Hong wouldn't have forced him to follow him if he wants money, so he needs to find a person to get rid of the responsibility. Suddenly, the hero noticed a detail. Someone was holding a flag that stated that prophecies and predictions were made in this place. A certain man was sitting in a shelter, and it was the same prophet raising his hand. The protagonist stopped, and soon he said that they were there. The incredulous man could not understand how this was possible because they came to a homeless person. Ming said that this master must be hidden, and if man does not believe in him, let him look for himself. The boat in front of him is actually a weapon. The strong bad smell forces him to avoid it 3 kilometers away. The alarmed agent could not understand what other weapons and bad smell the master could have. Even the people who passed by the place covered their noses so as not to smell this disgusting smell. The protagonist asked the agent to stay here because he needed to buy an orange. Soon the hero approached the homeless man and called him a helper, after which he pointed to the big guy behind him and said that he was a rich man and that together they could win. The homeless man realized that this was a very serious problem and that it would cost at least as much and showed 5 fingers on his hand. Ming was eager to make even more money and asked if the man had something rare or strange. Because he could also sell it, Ming was willing to pay double. The man handed over a certain bracelet and wanted 1,000 for it, but for the hero this was not a problem. The guy was ready to give him food and shelter. The protagonist arrives at the agent saying that this master was incomparable, only that there was a small prop. He asked for 100,000 for help, and the agent should go with him and scare him with a gun. The agent remembered how Hong told him to temporarily obey Ming and fulfill all his conditions. The obedient man immediately agreed because he was ready to do whatever his brother told him. A moment later, he and the agent approached the Taoist and said he would go with them. Suddenly, the man remembered that he still had many things to do. The hero hugged him and said that the man had not told everything. The homeless man saw that Ming made good offers, but his destination is unusual. The homeless man was ready to do anything if he just gave him his word and money. The words before the assistance were so deep that the agent liked it. Suddenly, someone behind him shouted that if Ming didn't give him the golden goo and return the divine secret box, then he would be forced to feed it to the little ghost. With horror, the man and the guy turned around and saw the ghost god. Many little demons began to attack them. All frightened realized that they were really ghosts. Fear fueled the energy of the ghosts and made them much stronger. Afraid, the men began to hug each other because the ghosts wanted to eat them, but the mysterious homeless man wanted to solve this problem and asked the hero to take all the food and feed them. The hero also understood that ghosts do not eat human food. The master suggested that they do not eat human food because they are turned on young objects. Lowering his pants, the man smiled and told the boy to run faster because he would use all his indescribable strength of youth, which he had been saving for 300 years to soak them. The protagonist immediately ran away, saying that he was going to send reinforcements and immediately returned to save him. Meanwhile, the villager thought he was abandoning his allies, but he couldn't escape his fate. John bowed down and summoned the ancient spirits. He was truly old and his strength and youthful essence had weakened, but the elder added, pointing his finger at Ming, that he was still young and he must be eaten. Meanwhile, the ghost got closer and closer to the hero. At that moment, the guy realized that that old fool had deceived him, and it was time to use Plan B. Ming wanted to know if it was true that ghosts could go through walls. The little ghost just smiled in response. All the hero could have was hope and believe. He began to summon the golden goo. Feeling severe pain, the guy endured as the goo left his body. Once outside, the golden goo immediately took off. The Ghost King rejoiced because he had finally found the golden king goo. The old man was also surprised by the exit of a flying insect from the hero's body. Ming ordered Goo to attack, but the baby seemed to be afraid of something and started crying. The ghosts immediately realized this, but were still afraid of the baby. Soon the main ghost ordered the other ghosts to attack and destroy the hero. Even Goo himself was scared by this turn of events, and he immediately wanted to fly into the hero's body so as not to get hurt. The protagonist was furious because he did not let the golden goo come out to be useless in the most critical moments. Little by little, the ghosts began to get closer and closer to make their attack. Suddenly, the main ghost noticed the accounts of the only leader. These were the same magical accounts that John Sanjian gave to the hero. After examining them, the guy was surprised because he hadn't considered them weapons before. But it was really so. These are rare weapons in the universe, and were called beads. The old man said that as far as he could remember, the hero did not even pay him for them. In a frantic fury, the protagonist immediately ran to the old man, because after the purchase he did not give him any guarantees. Meanwhile, the reinforcements began to approach. Agent Wei asked his temporary boss if he needed help. The winner refused because they were just exchanging martial techniques. The agent noticed that he seemed to have encountered a problem and was simply surprised how he and the master suddenly disappeared. The protagonist added that money is the most important thing and other problems can be solved privately. The hero also said that they found the 4 good gods, but they drove them away. Ming says that this is all because the old man possesses all kinds of things that are worthwhile. If it weren't for him, they wouldn't have gotten rid of the ghost so easily. That's why they must return quickly now. And the protagonist adds that with the old man they can use their skills to send the Missouri chief to hell. The protagonist hugs the man who was outraged that he was mocking him for having no skills, but Ming wanted to give him a chance to show off, and said that if he could they would get rich. Bringing the man to the zombie, Hong asked if he could do it. Meanwhile, the protagonist was thinking that it didn't matter if he did it or not. Anyway, it wouldn't be his fault. But the old man smiled and said that this was just a small problem. Acting like God and creating ghosts is his most feasible task. Then the old man begins taking the objects for the ritual in his hands, then began to invoke the spirits of heaven and earth. Everyone watched in awe as the elder performed the ancient ritual. The zombie had not reacted, but suddenly he gradually began to move. The elder rang the bell, which meant that the ceremony was over. It was as if the zombie began to regain its former appearance and began to have memory. The hero was perplexed that this old man had some kind of tactic and didn't know what to do. The agent closely followed the whole process. Hong immediately began to cry because this happened. The appearance of zombies began to dissipate and a man's face soon appeared. The old man announced that the lifeless man was lifeless and asked to accept his condolences. Hong, continuing to cry, thanked the master and asked if he had any wishes. She said she could fulfill them as long as it was in her power. Meanwhile, the protagonist was thinking that he had to defeat this guy and become stronger. With a bit of strangeness, the hero added that, as he said, his goose search technique never makes mistakes and the master is simply excellent. A moment later, he started to take the master away, saying that today he would manage the funds with the boss. But in this case, the agents did not dare to follow him. The protagonist took the old man to have fun. Sometime later, John was sitting in a club with several girls and was incredibly embarrassed. Meanwhile, Ming was grateful to the master and drank the glass to the bottom. He said he would be very happy if they worked together, in addition to having meat and wine dishes every day. The old man agreed to work with the hero, recognizing him as a smart guy. The protagonist spoke in his ear that he would still make several beauties fall in love with them. The next morning, the protagonist barely managed to get out of bed after yesterday's party. He made a video of the old man and the girls doing all sorts of obscene things. When the man wakes up, he will have something to see. A moment later, the door opened in front of the hero. The old man, crying and upset, was there bowing before the prota. John literally begged them to live together. The stunned hero didn't know what that meant. The old man said that all this was because yesterday he went too far and lost his innocence of 300 years. He says that the hero must now take responsibility for him. This news surprised Prota and at the same time bothered him. Ming, slamming the door in front of the old man, asked him to hurry up and leave. Calling him useless, the crying old man just begged for a roof over his head and food. He says that he could show some tricks as payment, but Ming was categorically against it, because following him was too dangerous. And now that the old man has no mana, then there is no way. In this world, every day was full of danger. The protagonist adds that there are a lot of people here who are cruel to homeless elderly people like him. The old man was amazed that the hero seriously thought he had mana when he started taking care of him. The main character thought it was his fault, because if he hadn't taken the old man to the nightclub yesterday, so that wouldn't have happened. Suddenly the door opened again and the old man entered through it. The hero insisted that he would give him the money and he would leave, but the guy was on his knees and begged the hero to stay. The old man says that the guy seemed shameless, but in fact he had a good heart. The protagonist admitted that he really wasn't a good person, and also didn't want to be, so that's why the old man shouldn't mess with him. Suddenly, Agent Xiao Wu rushed into the room. He had news for the main character and the old man. Then he warned that they had found the whereabouts of the strange mortal. The agent said that the boss ordered them to go immediately. After hearing the news, the elder added that while he was learning the way of the Tao, he was too proud to lose everything and lost. Hearing this, the protagonist immediately concluded that the old man believed in the Tao. A moment later, the Yong chief notified that his people had already surrounded the secret base of the immortal strangers, and they were just waiting for the hero to lure him to get rid of him. Now the protagonist thinks that his problems were increasing one after another. Then he raised his hand, asking for more money. The girl just ordered the agent to give the hero more money. One of the agents immediately provided a briefcase full of money. Ming, smiling, said that actually that immortal stranger has great strength and he will try his best. Sometime later, everyone was driving together in a car at an incredible speed. At that moment, the hero ordered the old man to wait for him. John replied that this is not a problem. In addition, John said that a man as old is not as strong as him. But by helping the guy, the old man believes that he is still within the team. Soon the team went to recognize the situation and understand if the immortal was threatening their lives. One of the agents began to have concerns because the immortal was still inside, and there was only one way out. But he didn't go anywhere all this time. Suddenly the protagonist asked for 500,000 more, and he was definitely going to get it. Hong asked the hero if he was surely so sure. Ming, with a smile on his face, just wanted to know if she would add money or not. Hong immediately agreed. The young man said that this was really the right choice, and then went to get the immortal along with his team. They went to the only entrance, and the protagonist told the old man to just wait outside, and then he would bring the people. The apprehensive old man asked if he was really sure of this. The self-confident hero added that he will fight the guy before his skill could control him. He consciously then drew the golden goo out. At that moment, he wanted goo to counterattack. The protagonist turned to the old man and said that this immortal of his had problems with his head. The old man only thought that the hero seemed self-confident, but he really is. Suddenly, the wall collapsed and something began to crawl out of it. The agent quickly started shooting at the wall because he wanted to neutralize the immortal. The ball that fell on the wall was like bulletproof. The old man noted using a gun is useless and needs to be thrown stones or branches against it. Ming hit the iron goo with his fist. This iron absorb all metal, but it is not fatal. The immortal stranger must have other tricks. Upon noticing a brick on the ground, the hero immediately began to reach for it, and threw it with all his strength directly into this iron-absorbing goo to neutralize it. Unfortunately, the protagonist hit the old man on the head and thus neutralized him. Ming was very embarrassed and at that moment realized that unfortunately he had lost his way. The old man fell to the ground and the agent continued to throw stones at the immortal. At that moment, the immortal showed his true nature to the people around him. He said, smiling, that his iron absorption goo was the strongest defense in the world, and nothing could pierce it. Ming was just intrigued by it, and he wanted to find out if it was really true. A moment later, he hit the immortal with all his might, and the beast began to fall to the ground without understanding what happened. The immortal was shocked by what was happening because his iron-absorbing goo could block all attacks, but now it would be no match for Ming's golden goo. Meanwhile, the little insect was already about to make its next attack. Normally, the golden goo is not a big fan of eating iron, but now it absorbed this goo with ease. The golden goo began to deal with the iron goo that screamed furiously for this creature to lose its life. But the hero knew he could not destroy it. The immortal was surprised that the hero was actually hiding the golden goo within himself. Moments later, the agents began to run towards the immortal who was lying on the ground. Soon an aura of black magic began to emerge from him and rose up. Suddenly, this aura attacked one of the agents, who then began to writhe in pain. The protagonist saw that Agent Wood fled and added that he truly deserved the title of Mad Pilot. Meanwhile, the unshakable immortal took the life of one of the agents, draining his spiritual energy. Ming said that next time he would study this iron goo in depth because he didn't like sequential attacks. Ming believes that anyway, if he is strong enough, he can become an annihilation machine. At that moment, the young man throwing a brick hoped to hurt the immortal. He used the fateful goo against the immortal, but he knew nothing about the art goo. When the immortal tried to insult the hero, a brick flew straight at his head. Then the same immortal fell to the ground and screamed in pain. The protagonist said that the iron-absorbing goo is just a distraction, so obviously he would use sneaky techniques. But suddenly the protagonist, who previously felt confident, was hit by a brick. This was done by the old man, who said that a flying brick is only as good as its skill, which is why he took revenge on the hero. Meanwhile, on the rooftops, someone observed all the incidents. This certain man concluded that the golden goo choosing a master as the protagonist was something interesting. Sometime later, Ming was with an ice pack and wanted to ask the old man why the hell he threw a brick at him. John replied that this happened because Ming threw the brick at his head first. The hero didn't feel guilty and said that if he had thrown it where he was supposed to, then the immortal stranger would have been hit. But even if the brick caused him damage, he wouldn't have broken through the protection of the iron-absorbing goo. The protagonist realized that the immortal the first time made him think he wouldn't hit him. The second time, he used the iron goo to hit him and become overconfident. At that moment, the old man admitted that the hero was too smart for the younger brother, just as he was also in times past. It was then that the hero realized that it was not for nothing that he received the devouring soul, and also the old man recognized the iron goo at first sight and could easily take a hit from it. The guy wanted to find out who the old man was. Joao said that this happened in 1999, and he can no longer hide it, even though he signed a confidentiality agreement. The old man says that the memory of the secret people has been erased, and he will tell what happened. Half an hour later, the old man still said that they were counterattacking Mars and the Martian girls were assertive. Sighing strongly, Ming simply begged the old man to stop talking nonsense. But the guy didn't stop and also said that on a Mars peak, he belonged to a special team of agents. Suddenly, the hero asked if the old man really knew how hard it was to live. Then he started talking that he was from a small village and was the pride of this village, but on the first day he arrived here, he already understood that he was nobody and started working. Ming says that he had set his goals so low that he just wanted to work hard so that he could live an ordinary life. No matter what the situation is, no matter how hard he works, and no matter how lucky he is, it will be at least 10 to 20 years before he has his own house and car in this city. The young man added that every day he doesn't know if he can live until the next day, and he doesn't know when Chief Hong will abandon him, or when the Master's Goo will appear again. At this point, John added that the hero in this case can escape. Ming replies that this is extremely difficult because he was very afraid, but he is also too greedy now and is not the same as before. Ming says that he always wanted to win at least once as a human being. The old man replied that it doesn't matter if they live for money or for happiness, after all, everyone will leave in the same way. Ming reveals that he is afraid to leave, although he is greedy and selfish. The elder knew that the greater his power, the greater the responsibility. Moreover, if his opinions do not coincide with the state of affairs he will face, then he must have compassion. For example, respect the elders and help the youngest. The hero understood that he is responsible for the old, and said that as long as he has the opportunity to feed his stomach, he will not remain hungry. The protagonist promised that from now on they will sincerely work with each other and will definitely be on the side of Chief Hong and will make a few more $1 million. The old man knew that this was really a good plan. Suddenly, an agent rushed into the room and shouted to the master that he had bad news. The boss Hong asked them to run to the parking lot because some kind of disturbance had been caused there. The protagonist and the old man were ready. They put on a uniform while the boss and the agents were already waiting for them. A few minutes later, the agent arrived with Ming and John. They were greeted by some strange man who addressed Hong, questioning if the Ming bandage on his head was because he had some kind of mental abnormality. The protagonist looked at the surprised guy and asked if he was talking to him. The man quickly asked if the protagonist liked what he heard. Then he added that if Ming didn't like it, he could beat him up. The protagonist without hesitation hits the insolent man with all his strength, saying that no one dares to insult him. The man falls to the ground and is in an unconscious state. The hero was happy to have come across such a generous guy that he even let himself be beaten. At that moment, everyone was watching this situation. Agent Wu knew that after what Ming did, this was the end of the war. It was inevitable, the way this crazy man named Wei has been developing since the end of Mulan, and now he will probably counterattack by sending 2/3 of the national force. Meanwhile, the girl was surprised that Ming used the good technique and said that he just needed to intimidate this guy. But the hero objected because the lady hadn't said that before, and also suggested that she was still afraid of them. Suddenly, the killer stood up and shouted for the guys to finally move forward, finish off the young man. Quickly, the agents took their blades and wanted to attack Ming. But not everything was so simple, and the hero decided to fight back and fight them. With ease, the protagonist defeated all the opponents who were in his way. Against him were agents and other strangers who also had weapons in their hands. Agent Wu in turn asked Chief Hong if they needed to intervene, but the girl wanted the hero to suffer because he didn't listen to her. The old master immediately realized that she seemed to really care Ming, or else it was that goo lure that the young man used earlier. Meanwhile, the fierce fight continued and the attackers only wanted the end of the hero. The calm protagonist could easily stop huge sword attacks with crushing blows. He keeps knocking down his opponents with only his hands. Suddenly, someone behind the hero delivered a powerful direct attack on his back. Out of frantic pain, the hero immediately fell to the ground and was followed by several other mind-blowing attacks that could crush absolutely anyone. With apprehension, all the allies watched the fight that was going on. They were worried about the hero because there was only one of him, and there were many opponents. The old man knew that this talent of the young man was incredible. Ming got up and continued the battle against a large number of opponents, but soon realized that one of the rivals was retreating. The guy opened the car door as if he wanted to leave the battlefield. Meanwhile, the protagonist finished off one of the last opponents who stood in his way. Suddenly, he saw something he couldn't have foreseen. An outraged man was sitting behind the wheel and driving straight towards the hero. Moments later, he hit the hero with the car and the boy started to fall to the ground. The unknown man began to leave the battlefield, leaving the hero on the ground. Hong approached the main character lying on the ground and asked him to stop with this confidence because the next time Wei would have no pity. Suddenly, a powerful blow directly hit Chief Hong's cheek. The protagonist grabbed her by the neck and shouted that she was the only one making noise here. He said he was just defending himself, and the fact that she didn't help him is her problem. But Hong shouldn't blame him for what happens. After these words, the protagonist immediately threw the girl to the ground furious. He went back to shouting that if she didn't do something, then they could fight and she would see who would win and who would lose. Otherwise, he leaves. Ming adds that the girl kidnapped him absurdly and almost eliminated him, and now she did it again, lying to him. The prota also says that she also used him as bait when she made him a scapegoat. In addition, she did absolutely nothing when he was attacked every time. The protagonist, watching the girl closely, said that he was only doing it to survive and make money. The boss objected, saying that he himself deceived and hurt her. At that moment, Ming wanted to know when he did it. Hong says that it happened when they captured Qing and he didn't care about her. The boss says she called him, but he ran away and didn't help. He even dared to demand a sum of money. The old man, hearing this, was outraged because he didn't understand what that woman was saying. The protagonist starts laughing because he also wanted to know what the hell this woman was talking about. Sighing strongly, Hong admitted that he had finished talking. After listening to the girl, the hero concluded that she was mistaken. He says he doesn't like to waste time arguing with women. Then the boy turned to Agent Wu and questioned who was the first to deceive whom. The agent, in shock, couldn't say a word. and didn't know how to answer that. The lady was also outraged to the extreme, and she called Ming, asking him to repeat if he was brave enough. But the guy objected because he didn't consider himself an idiot and said he was brave enough for that. The agent and the hero watched each other and at the same time remained silent. Hong shed a few tears but didn't understand why he wasn't afraid of Ming. Meanwhile, the old man asked them not to try to argue anymore. He thinks that Hong is just a girl who is still under Gu's attraction. The reason why she behaves the way she behaves now is because the attraction influenced her too much and she became fond. The boss, hearing this, was amazed because she didn't think that this attraction that the protagonist used against her could have such an impact. At that moment, the protagonist approached the girl and gave her a passionate kiss. The agents were surprised by what the hero did and already wanted to fight him. The hero did not stop and continued to kiss Hong. All the agents began to move. One of them even drew his gun to stop them. At that moment, the protagonist told the girl that men are from heaven and women are from earth, so she needs to obey him. Ming also added that it doesn't matter what kind of woman she was before, because now she is his wife. At the same time, the protagonist ordered the girl to come to him that night. People didn't understand how he could offer such a thing. The agents were simply surprised at how brave the hero was. The embarrassed girl called Ming a fool and said she wouldn't go to him. The old man and the hero looked at each other, realizing that she wouldn't. Sometime later, Wei came to the boss and said that they failed. The guy said that before they didn't know where this Ming came from, but he fought very well and wasn't afraid of being annihilated. Wei remembers that he took the steering wheel and hit him and said that if Ming had survived, he would definitely be incapacitated. At this moment, the man begged the boss to give him one more chance, and then he would definitely finish off Ming's remains. The boss only gave the man 3 days and threw a kind of jar on the ground. Holding the bottle tightly in his hands, the man thanked Lord Buddha and soon drank an unknown green liquid. After drinking this, he felt changes in his body. The skin on his face turned green, and a smile began to appear. A man approached him and noticed changes in his face, so the guy wanted to know if Wei was okay. Wei, laughing loudly, asked the young master not to worry, because even if he went crazy, he would still remember him and not harm him. Zhang asked Wei to do him a favor. He revealed that this brat, whose name was Ming, was his university classmate and insulted him. Obviously, the man left out the part that he stole the protagonist's wife. Then Zhang asked Wei to find Ming and take revenge. Wei didn't care because that was his ultimate goal. Suddenly, Zhang turned to the man and asked him to bring Ming to him, because he wanted to see the hero suffer as an obedient servant. The man agreed with the boy and said that his order would be fulfilled. After that, Zhang entered the room and asked if his father was looking for him. The man replied that his son had already graduated and it was time to know the business of his company. Upon hearing these words, Zhang began to feel incredibly nervous because he still didn't feel ready enough. But his father noticed that they didn't have much time. He said that the group had entered a new phase, so he was given the opportunity to change the world. The father said that all this was created just for Zhang. Hearing this, the son was amazed by what his father told him. Meanwhile, scientists in a secret laboratory are investigating certain phenomena, and in the cells there are unknown creatures with red eyes. At the same time, the hero is training boxing with Agent Wu. He noticed that since they started training, the agent has never beaten him. The exhausted man realized that 3 hours had already passed and wanted to know if Ming was tired. The protagonist, indignant, wanted someone else to train with him. The agent, realizing the complexity of the situation, said that no one else was able to train with him. All opponents who entered the ring earlier were defeated. In this case, the hero decided that it was worth continuing with the agent. After the workout, he immediately decided to go take a shower. Getting out of the shower, he felt someone enter his room. As he turned around, there was a girl in the room, who looked pityingly at the guy. The protagonist also looked at her, perplexed, and asked what Qing was doing here. The girl tried to say something. After thinking for a while, the protagonist invited her to come in, but unexpectedly the girl replied that there was no need for that. Surprised, the guy wanted to know why she came here suddenly. She leaned sharply and apologized for being rude to him in the last few days. She also thanked him for having spared words about her. The girl, as a sign of gratitude, kissed the hero on the cheek. As if nothing had happened, she wished him a good night. Thinking about this situation, the hero said the word thank you. He came to the conclusion that being thanked by someone is not so bad. The events continue to happen the next day, with the whole team eating in the same establishment. The old man asked the waitress for 12 more sticks of meat and 100 oysters, as well as 5 bottles of wine. Agent Wu started laughing because even he didn't understand how the old man could fit so much food in him. Suddenly, the girl hit the table with all her might and asked the hero not to go too far and not to think that she didn't know that he was the one who suggested coming here. Ming was outraged by this and ordered her to sit down because the hella woman knocks on the table when everyone is eating. Hong, pointing the finger, said that a loser is still a loser, and his powers are not that great. The girl went on to say that the way the protagonist eats is disgusting, and she didn't think he would have a good life even with money. As soon as she said that, she immediately went out the door and closed it. With a loud bang, everyone felt the same embarrassment. After the girl left, the agent stood up and suggested to the protagonist to check on the girl and help her calm down. This only made the old man laugh because this is a typical female defiant scene. The protagonist believed that she was right in what she said, but the girl wanted to belittle him, and he never denied that he was from the lower class. Ming also did not admit to being treated like this. In addition, the protagonist did not understand why she was so angry. The old man patted the hero on the shoulder and said that everything is fine, and that he should not take it seriously. John also said that Hong was just a girl and there is nothing special about her. Suddenly someone called the hero, and judging by the voice he immediately realized who Zhang and his friends were. Ming was surprised at first, but soon said that Zhang was really lucky, because he arrived at a good time. Zhang replied that he had been looking for him for so long, and now he was right in front of him. At that moment the guy says that his real name was Zhang Xiang, and Wang's company belongs to his family. The unperturbed hero looked at the man and asked if he knew that if he talked too much he would turn into a shirt of longing. This only made Zhang laugh, and he asked if the protagonist was confident just because he knew how to fight him once. Then said that Ming could run away. Zhang quickly asked his friends to get ready. One of them turned on the phone and called more people to help. Meanwhile, the second friend heard that the hero was a very good fighter and wanted to fight him first. The protagonist was just happy with it and wanted to fight Zhang's safe friend. The guy entered the battle together with Ming. At the same time, Zhang was watching his friend who was from the military police school. The guy thought his friend was strong enough to deal with such a petty idiot like Ming. In an instant, the friend was hit by the protagonist with all his might. The man even started crying and screaming. Literally after a single blow, the guy stopped standing and started falling. This fight was completely easy for the hero, and he continued to calmly look at the guy, who was lying on the ground. A few seconds later, he was already looking at Zhang and said that the guy was next. The guy didn't even know what to answer. He was silent and observed what was happening. The hero finished off the enemy so fast he was lying on the ground. Zhang asked where the hero had so much confidence and who allowed him to be so arrogant. The protagonist replied that he knew that all Zhang could do was buy people with money. Anyway, with money, he can pay for everything. But the hero also has money. Zhang with a trembling voice began to tell Ming not to think that with money you can do anything. Then he said that in addition to money, the young man also needs strength. Zhang said that the people he beat were not easy and confessed that one of the boys who was lying on the ground was the son of the Supreme Commander. Ming grabs Zhang by the neck and asked what he was trying to tell him. He had the feeling that he had humiliated someone worse than Zhang. The guy replied that the protagonist had humiliated him, although he only managed to assault him a few times. Immediately after that, he hits Ming's forehead with all his strength, and a moment later he falls to the ground. The old man continued to watch all of this and wanted Ming to show how far he could go. Some time later, a car stopped and Wei looked for his companion lying on the ground. All of Ming's opponents were defeated and stayed on the ground. Wei was angry with the hero and shouted that it was time for the protege had arrived. Soon the man pointed his finger at the guy and said to hit him. Many people with guns started running towards the main character trying to attack him. The hero only smiled because he was ready to fight with a large number of people. With slashing blows, he destroyed one enemy after another. Moving at an incredible speed, the opponents had no chance to resist the hero in battle. Unexpectedly, he took a pistol and began to aim at the protagonist. He was hit. The furious boy shouted for Ming to get screwed, but behind him was the old man who wanted to do something. Another gun was fired. Meanwhile, the old man started to drag the hero towards himself, and they were about to leave the place. This surprised Wei because he had never seen an old man move at such a great speed. The old man also had to carry the protagonist's body on his back. Already in the hospital, Ming finally woke up a few hours later shaking in pain. He started to get out of the hospital bed, and Han wanted to ask if the hero knew how much noise he had made in the city. The old man said that it had already happened and now they needed to solve the problem. Hong objected, saying that Minister Wang's only son was seriously injured. She adds that Ming could already be considered a corpse for having gotten in the way of these people. The protagonist believed that this was his problem, and he would take care of it himself. So he says that there was no need to worry. Hong didn't understand how he could take care of it himself and started cursing him. The old man joined the discussion and asked Hong to think about what she was talking about. He said that although Ming beat someone, everyone were doing bad things and one of them even shot. Hong again put himself against the boy and said that the shooting is also a police thing, and in this case there was a policeman with the gun. The protagonist, looking closely at the girl, concluded that she definitely didn't care about him. Suddenly another agent came and warned the boss that things were bad for them. Another news came to them that the son of the member of the Council of Ministers had not survived in the hospital. Eda news shocked everyone. The old man found all this very strange because the guy had only one arm and one broken leg, and when he was taken to the hospital he did not resist. It seems that someone is behind everything. Meanwhile, at the hospital, Zhang turns to his father, who said that Chen was not alive. This fact caused extreme revolt in the boy, and he was outraged by what happened. Soon after, the father gave the go-ahead for his agent to act as an agent. The man shook his head and agreed. Zhang did not understand what was happening here. A few seconds later, the doctor started to approach the guy carrying some kind of syringe. Zhang, squirming, yelled that he didn't want to and begged the father not to do it. The father turned to his son and replied that if they don't do it, his whole body will be paralyzed for life. So he concluded that although risky, it is worth it. After his words, the son was immediately given some kind of narcotic. The moment it was administered, the guy already felt his body begin to change. The bandages immediately began to tear his hands and his legs also recovered. Zhang felt a different power after the mysterious injection. Suddenly, another man asked to search the entire city to find what destroyed his son. Meanwhile, Wei was talking to his friends and then he realized that his time had finally come. He says that no matter how much they influence the search in the city, because the minister will still be on his side, they wanted to destroy Hong and the rest of the people who trampled on them. And they should also find the boy Ming. Many of the brothers in arms agreed and wanted to go in search of him. Some time later, the protagonist left the hospital with the old John. The old man said that this time the hero also committed a crime, so all he can do is run away. But the protagonist objected because he believed that he had not eliminated anyone. The old man certainly knew that the young man had not hit him that hard, but the guy didn't survive and many people saw it happen. So the old man said that Ming should run for his life. The protagonist doesn't understand why he had to run away. The guy thought that people as ordinary as him, even with opportunities, would forever be unable to change their lives. The old man knew that the hero was still young and his capabilities were beyond his control. He needed to remember that, but added that all Ming needs to do now is run and then think about what to do. The old man says that he had a friend in Sichuan, so he would give the address to the main character and they would meet. The guy says that after Ming arrives in Sichuan, they could catch people to intercept him, so the old man decided to teach him a few words. He said that hemp means that he is a friend. Reading hemp means that you are like one of them. If you say that you are reading hemp, it means that they will be friends. The old man, having told the secret code, said that they should hurry up before they are found, otherwise it will end badly for them. The protagonist agreed and they started running in different directions. After a few minutes of intense running, the hero disguised himself and kept an eye on someone. He saw Boss Hong and Agent Wu getting into the car. Hong asked the agent if the main character had escaped. The agent confirmed this, and also asked who would take care of the girl now that Ming had escaped. The protagonist, hearing this, realized that Agent Wu was a traitor. Ming believes that he was just taking advantage of the opportunity while the young man was not around to incriminate him. Hong arrived at the parking lot, and didn't understand why Qing hadn't arrived yet. The man suggested that she be the first to leave the place, and that he would find her. But the girl refused and asked her not to worry because she wanted to wait a little longer for her. Meanwhile, the protagonist observed everything that was happening. Suddenly, he discovered a man who had also entered the parking lot. Wei and his friends asked the agent to give it to Chief Hong without resisting. At that moment, someone pushed Qing straight into the clutches of the enemies. The boss was outraged, wanting to know what was going on here and what the hell he was doing. Wei, holding the girl by the hair, said that Mulan had been lifeless for a long time, and the boss still thought she was very powerful. Wei says that Qing should tell him where Ming was, or he couldn't guarantee what would happen. At that moment, Hong stood up, saying that the protagonist had run away, and if he wanted to find him, then he should hurry up and not waste time. Wei was surprised because he couldn't believe that Ming had really left her. The man, picking up a knife again, started to ask the girl to tell him where Ming was. Agent Wu turned to the guy and said that Ming really escaped. He was so strong that they couldn't stop him. Wei yells, asking if they thought it was so easy to deceive him. Then out of anger, he injured the girl and she screamed in pain. This event shocked the agents and they watched without knowing what to do. If they don't call the protagonist, the girl won't survive. Meanwhile, Ming was smoking a cigarette. He remembered how Qing had thanked him earlier, so he decided to do something. The agents were again surprised by the possibility of such an incredible result. The poor girl lay down on the ground and continued to cry in pain. Wei, pointing his blade at the hero, sent his friends to take him. Several armed men immediately began to attack the protagonist, who repels his attacks with unknown strength. Hong, observing all this, wanted to understand how the guy could go back to dealing with these men. At that moment, the Wei, fearing a bad result, took his weapon again. Meanwhile, the boss also decided to carry out a counterattack and took a knife. A few seconds later, the hero had already dealt with the villainous friends, but Wei decided to shoot the shell like last time. Hong thought about how he could help him. The shot went off again and hit the hero directly in the body. Due to severe pain, he fell to the ground and didn't move. His body began to be covered by a black aura, and he stood up. His body was again completely covered in unknown black magic, and a moment later the golden goo arrived. Although it was not the absolute defense of the mysterious immortal, the protagonist could also handle this attack. The villain did not understand how this was possible because he had never seen it before. All the bandits around him were also perplexed that the hero was capable of this. For all of them, this was beyond logic. And meanwhile, Hong was amazed at the hero's speed. A second later, a powerful punch landed on Wei's head. The incredible force of the blow made the villain fly meters away. Sighing strongly, the boy concluded that each of them seemed not to want to live. but suddenly Wei started to get up. Suddenly Agent Wu shouted that there was an enemy behind Ming. Wei got up thanks to Chief Chan's miracle remedy. The protagonist launched another powerful attack and hit his head directly on his head. The enemy fell to the ground and couldn't resist the blow. Sing, lying on the ground, wondered why he came back to take care of her. The protagonist replied that it happened because she thanked him and he wants to be a good person for her. After what happened, the boy said that she would be fine and asked them to hurry up and leave. Chief Hong asked the hero to leave with them because they had already prepared the boat. The protagonist replied that what happened between them was business and he was the cause of all the problems, so he would go alone. The agent also said that he liked him a lot because he is the bravest person. At that moment, Hong couldn't believe that everything that happened between them was just business. But even so, the hero confirmed. Because of this, the boss Hong started to cry and asked him to repeat again. The hero again said that everything that happened between them was just business and there was no passion. The protagonist also remembers that the golden goo had no influence on her. Ming says that she just lied about the attraction of the golden goo and asked her not to be stupid. Hong started crying and was offended because the hero wanted to leave. Agent Wu thought that Ming was much more of a man than him. At that moment, the protagonist ends up falling to the ground and felt his energy running out. The golden goo was also unconscious. The old man, looking at Ming, concluded that the young man must feel a recovery from the overabundance of using the golden goo. John suddenly said that someone was following him all the way and asked him to leave. A moment later, the master's essence appeared in front of the elder. The unknown person immediately realized that John was under the guise of Kennen. His assumptions were half correct why that man should chase the golden goo and not an old man. The man replied that first he would deal with him, and then chase the golden goo. The guy adds that it would be more trustworthy. The old man, hearing this, laughed because he thought the guy was too stupid. Suddenly, an unknown person used the bloody goo. The old man also started to use his magical skills and asked the unknown person why he was so worried. The dark and unknown wizard used iron absorption, but suddenly the old man seemed to disappear before the stranger. Seeing this, he was surprised because John had really gotten worse. The stranger concluded that everyone would regret it. Meanwhile, the protagonist watched Agent Wu Qing and Hong inside the car. The protagonist was happy because it was rare for him to be so nice to someone, and he wished that Qing was able to live freely happily. Ming puts on his cap, realizing that he now needed to look for Chief Chen in the group. Sometime after events continued to occur in Wang's group, Zhang was amazed that he could feel his body again. The father explained that his compatibility was successful and this is the latest and most advanced biological transformation technology originating from the ancient Wugu. Zhang, hearing this, was happy because it could be compatible with some kind of beetle. His body was seriously injured and this required the skin of greater regeneration. In the end, he got a companion, a cockroach. From that fact, the guy was no longer so happy and was amazed that it was a cockroach. Meanwhile, the protagonist was entering the building. He hoped that the guards had not deceived him about the whereabouts of Zhang and his father. There were cameras in the building that detected the prota. The security guard immediately informed all units that an unidentified person had been found who had entered the building. Upon receiving the notification, the father was not surprised, but Zhang was surprised. From the camera footage, they found out that Ming was in the building. The father was clearly not happy with this brat, and apparently they had screwed up again. Wang said that it seemed that it was finally time for his master to appear. Everyone knew who his real target was, and who they needed to destroy. Wang says that everyone wanted Ming's head. The masters wanted to team up with each other to defeat the hero with common efforts. Some of the allies still argued among themselves about the strength of the target. One guy says that in that case they should wait for Zhang, but if the target was weak, then they wouldn't have to make an effort. Meanwhile, the protagonist was already approaching Wang's room. He said that he needed to hurry up and create a commotion so that Agent Wu and the others could escape safely. But at this moment, a chase was taking place in the city, and they were chasing the car where the agent was with the boss and Xing. Wu told Hong that they were catching them again, and he would have to try harder. Hong ordered the man to focus only on the speed because if they caught them, they would obviously be finished. Meanwhile, events continued to take place in the building where the hero was located. Many cars went to the building to protect the boss Zhang. A large number of men with machine guns began to enter, saying that if the boss gets into trouble, they would lose their jobs. Ming, on one of the top floors, is successfully dodging the bullets of Zhang's servants. With the help of his incredibly strong abilities, he easily defeats people wielding weapons. Meanwhile, the unknown master was watching and saw that Ming was using the iron goo to create traps. A dark essence hovered around the room where there were a large number of enemies. The aura attacked each of the men who had weapons. People, noticing that it was a dark entity, were ordered not to shoot. All the soldiers were dragging, and the masters continued to watch him. They knew that he was clearly difficult, but they still thought that they would easily defeat him. They wanted the scorpion and the flower fairy to fight first. In this way, they believed that they would have the opportunity to catch the main character off guard. But Ming was not so simple, and knew that the two masters were watching him. He said that as long as this ground is covered with iron goo, no one will escape his eyes. The masters didn't understand what was happening here, and how was that possible? As far as they knew, they had already approached the hero, but he was no longer in that place. Suddenly, a dark aura began to emerge from the ceiling, and one of the masters realized that the hero was upstairs, and he got there by breaking through the ceiling. The hero could destroy all this iron without making a single sound. Right upstairs was Zhang's office, where the main character entered. At the same time, a powerful explosion occurred right on the floor. Father and Zhang began to get worried about what had happened. Then they saw someone jump out of a huge hole. The protagonist was completely covered in a dark aura. Zhang couldn't believe his eyes and didn't understand how the hero got here. But the protagonist wasn't stupid either, and saw that Zhang not only recovered so quickly, and became even more vile. The angry Zhang just added that this is all innovation and a beggar like him can't understand. Sighing hard, the protagonist realized that he hadn't beaten this guy up enough, but now that he was here to fix it. At that moment, the father decided to make a counteroffer to the prota. As he was very interested in his abilities, he offered Ming to join them. The hero suddenly agreed. This caused great concern in Zhang because he did not understand how Ming could agree so easily. The protagonist agreed to join them but had 3 conditions. This made Zhang laugh, but he soon thought that if the protagonist joins, then he won't get his revenge. Suddenly, the guy started saying that the protagonist's ex-girlfriend was his first love. This obviously didn't affect Ming, and he started to say his first condition. But Zhang again shouted that he wasn't in a position to beg for anything. So if he wanted to live, he just had to obediently wag his tail like a pathetic little dog. The protagonist commented that he believed that his father would not be as stupid as him. Then the young man says that he had already shown his skills that ordinary people don't have. The father finally realized that young Ming was definitely an interesting person. But anyway, the father added that he was just interesting, and what Zhang said was true. He went on to say that Ming was a low-status person and can't change roles with so little strength and skill. The words his father said offended Ming. The man added that in front of someone rich like him. The protagonist is just a pathetic insect. Wang laughs in the hero's face and says that this conversation was taking his time, and he was too naive to think that he could establish any conditions. At that moment, the protagonist began to attack the villain to take his life. But just before the attack, a counterattack followed. A master girl who, with the help of her magic snakes, wrapped herself in the hero's hand, and with all her strength, she threw him straight at the wall. Zhang was amazed that his father was able to negotiate with other masters, but his father asked to wait until Ming was beaten and couldn't stand. Then they would devour him. Zhang didn't understand anything of his father's words because he didn't understand how to absorb them. Meanwhile, the protagonist felt that that creature injected poison into him. This poison was not quite common, and no one but her could neutralize him. At that moment, another master began to attack the defenseless hero. A blonde guy was outraged because these masters dared to take their prey. Suddenly, magic was everywhere, and the masters also began to fight each other. One of the masters noticed Ming's skill about being able to break through metal and said that he had been waiting for a long time for a person with such a skill. So an unexpected attack ensued, but the hero was still able to dodge, and he also said that he had long realized that his skill could pierce metal, so he had been waiting for her for a long time. Even after many attacks, the protagonist was still standing happily. The master shouted that the next floor was his end. The guy said that there were armed people waiting for him. To try to escape, if he wanted to break through the ground, he would still be hit. Anyway, there were several people there pointing directly to the hole in the ground. Zhang yelled at Ming to give up because people of his status already knew him. Meanwhile, the hero gathered all his strength in his hands. A dark aura surrounded his body, but he found it difficult to move. At the same time, the golden goose slept depressed, but the hero spoke to her. The protagonist knew that she was already very tired, and so was he, but said that if he still had the strength to survive, then he wouldn't want to give up and would also thank the insect for giving him so much strength. And when this is over, she will be able to relax and rest. Golden Goo, hearing these words, immediately grew and seemed to come to life. This was followed by a powerful explosion that surprised everyone. The protagonist and the other masters turned to see what caused such a powerful explosion. It was Agent Wu along with Hong. They came to the hero's aid. The protagonist felt an indescribable feeling, but quickly asked what they were doing here, then asked them to leave. All the agents who were behind started to flee the scene. The blonde master shouted that they were not going anywhere. Agent Wu called his boss to quickly get out of here. Meanwhile, a green-haired master appeared in front of the hero and said that he was his opponent. Suddenly, the main character's body began to wrap around snakes, and the hand was so tight that there was no movement. But the hero was also not so simple, and was easily able to repel the attack. He had a blade in his hands with which he could fight snakes. Ming looked back and thanked him for the blow. He soon began to run towards his main objective. The father visibly began to worry and said he could not destroy him, but the protagonist in response hit the man in the head, destroying him with the first blow. After that, Ming grabbed Zhang by the neck and asked him what he said about ordinary people. The protagonist recalled aloud that the man said that they can't expect to change their lives. Jang quickly ordered all his soldiers to shoot the hero to neutralize him. Many shots immediately followed towards the guy, and most of them hit Zhang, who was next to Ming. With skillful movements, the hero continued to dodge the bullets. Meanwhile, the blonde master, embittered with the last of his strength, tried to do something, but Hong neutralized him with a skillful flick of the knife. Agent Wu didn't understand what the hell was going on here. The master said he looked impressive, but still wasn't a match for his weapon. The blonde man, as long as he had his cells, he was able to recover. When the regeneration ended, the blonde guy promised he wouldn't be so careless. The protagonist realized that the fire was being suppressed and the iron goo would no longer be able to stop him. If he was caught, it would be the end of his life. Ming simply jumped out of the window and started to fall to the ground. His golden goo was overwhelmed and had no intention of helping him, but the old man was already going to help the hero. There were mysterious seals on his hands and feet. He shouted for Ming to hurry up and listen to him. The old man, with the help of his magical skills, began to take off. He flew straight towards the protagonist to help him. John, having caught the hero, told him not to worry because his friend was already here. As we can see, the father was still alive and ordered the release of all the bursts. Panic began in the laboratory and the scientists began to release all the bursts. Soon a large number of mysterious creatures began to leave. They began to create unrest in the city and attack innocent people. The brave men tried to shoot back at the mysterious creatures. The creatures themselves were still much stronger than ordinary people and could easily suppress their attack. The minister was informed that a bunch of fierce monsters had appeared on the street, many of them among the civilians and the military. He was not interested in this and wanted to know about the boy Ming. The worker reported that they have not found him yet, but there were so many strange creatures here, and it was better to level up. The experienced minister ordered increased security, and a state of emergency for military equipment began to travel around the city to fight mysterious creatures. Sometime later, the protagonist woke up in an unknown place. The old man was sitting in front of him and said that he had finally woken up. Ming was amazed that the old man had saved him and wanted to know how long he had been passed out. The old man replied that in total he slept for 3 days, and a lot has changed in those 3 days. The protagonist, looking at his hand, realized that he no longer felt the presence of the golden goo. The old man says that the Wang group created a huge amount of artificial goo. They began to fight with government troops for only 3 days, which led to countless civilian corpses. This meant that Wang did not create all the monsters successfully. All these monsters want to change the rules, and the old man was sure that after that everything related to goo would be destroyed, including the protagonist. Ming, gathering all his strength in one fist, wanted to know how Hong and the others were. But the old man said that Ming had to worry about himself first, because the further away the safer he was. The guy says that Ming must find a way to leave the country. The firm hero said he would do it. The protagonist said to himself that he managed to leave the disaster full and crazy of Wang. At that moment, the hero left the city. He immediately thanked the man who gave him a ride. The man in turn asked Ming to take care of himself. Suddenly, someone turned to the hero, calling him by name. It was his fatty friend. The protagonist recognized the guy and decided to go to him. Fatty said that he heard that Ming had problems in the city and he was worried. Fatty adds that he couldn't get in touch with him and thought something had happened. The protagonist was surprised and wanted to know why Fatty moved to Hitcham. His friend, he replied that he came to this place because he was working on a project here. A moment later, they were already going somewhere together. Fatty brought the hero and said that this is the place where he works. He says that they are working on a project at the state level of secrecy. Although the living conditions are not so good, the development of the project has great potential. What he heard made Ming be apprehensive because he thought it was a pyramid scheme. But Fatty objected because the pyramids have no product and it is illegal. Fatty adds that his project, known as the Wang Team, is loved by all nations and costs $9.99 for 10 boxes. He says that Ming only needs to buy 100 boxes to become one of the employees. Obviously, the protagonist realized that this was Wang's team. Suddenly, another man came out and introduced him as a manager. The man was visibly happy to meet them. Sometime later, the events continued to take place at the place. Fatty and Ming went to lunch together. The friend asked the hero not to pay attention to the quality of the food, then explained that they allow you to experience difficulties because you cannot become a man without difficulty. Due to the quality of the fatty food, wanted to add some more ingredients. Ming was surprised, asking what the hell this was and why his friend was adding toothpaste. Fatty replied that other toothpaste can't be eaten, but his super toothpaste from Wang's team can be ingested and used as a treatment for diseases. He says that many female employees were diagnosed and felt much better when they started using this paste. That's why the box costs $999. In this case, the hero added that he wasn't so hungry. The friend also added that he arrived too late today and should take a lesson. The protagonist, after listening to his friend, he realized that Fatty didn't seem to notice how he was poisoned. Ming says that he must find a way to get his friend out of here. At this point, Fatty asked Ming what he thought they would do after they received the money. The protagonist only replied that he had to find a way to live well with and without money. Suddenly, one of the workers warned that the director was coming and everyone needed to prepare for the lesson. Fatty was very happy with this and told Ming that they needed to hurry up to get the best seats. A few minutes later, they already arrived at the classroom, but when he saw who the principal really was, the hero was simply stunned. It was his ex-girlfriend, Faye. At that moment, everyone present welcomed her as a principal. She was happy to see such a diligent attitude and smiled. Faye says out loud that she hopes this lecture will help each of them soon to realize their dreams of making money. The girl says that it wasn't that long ago that she was completely penniless and was just like them, but she found hope for life in her future. Faye says that a miracle happened and she believed that in the near future everyone could become equal to her, and maybe even better. The protagonist saw all this indignant because the girl was trying to use everyone for her own benefit. Meanwhile, his friend listened to the girl with admiration and applauded her. 2 hours later, Faye said that she would stay with them for a while to help encourage them. She also thanked everyone for coming. At the same time, several agents arrived for the lecture and approached Ming. Fatty was incredibly surprised because he didn't understand what was happening here. Ming asked his friend to go back to the dormitory because it seemed that the director wanted to talk to him personally. The embarrassed boy agreed and started to leave. The girl said she knew everything about him. So Ming said out loud that he assumed she also knew that Zhang had turned into a strange monster. The ex-girlfriend noticed that Ming was angry when he talked about Zhang, and she wanted to know if the young man was still angry with her. The protagonist just took his hands off her and asked her to leave him alone. Faye says that already broke up with Zhang because she couldn't stop thinking about the young man. The girl adds that anyway they always meet, and that could only mean that they are destined to be together. The girl even says that she approached Zhang because of her future. The protagonist just replied that she was a girl and should maintain her dignity, but the girl was outraged by this. Except for this body, she had nothing else, but wanted a better life, and the fact that she was trying to achieve this through her favorite means was justified. Faye also asked Ming not to think that Han was better than her because they are the same. The protagonist started to leave because it was all a stupid talk. Suddenly, the girl asked if he knew that she could destroy him if he kept working here, so Ming wanted to know what exactly she was going to do. The girl just invited the hero to go with her. As soon as they were alone in the room, the girl began to hug him and said that she missed him. The protagonist, a little worried, wanted to know what she was going to do. Faye said that with the help of her strength and her status in Wang's company, they would be able to escape and travel freely together. Ming immediately understood everything. Since Zhang abandoned her, he put her here in the pyramid scheme department to make up for it. The girl said he was wrong and said that she got it herself and received this status. The boy couldn't believe that she left Zhang without any compensation. The girl got stressed and started screaming that Ming is just a pitiful commoner. Then the girl filled him with curses. Suddenly a scream was heard in the hallway. Someone said that the police had arrived. The police told all the citizens inside the factory that they had been deceived by a pyramid scheme and that they were here to save them. A worker shouted that they would not allow his entrances. Then he told the others that these policemen were political rivals, so everyone must work together to prevent the enemy from destroying their dreams. The protagonist, hearing how everyone reacted to the fact that the police had arrived, he thought that his friend Fatty was an idiot for believing in the scheme. At that moment, the girl shouted that she knew he wanted to leave the country, and she had already contacted a smuggler. The girl says that they would escape together. The protagonist agrees, but says that as soon as they leave here, each one will go their own way. Meanwhile, the workers started to assault the police. The policeman said that if they beat him, the penalty was punishable by law, then said that they were sent by the workers' families to save them. Fatty, naive, just yelled at the police to leave because everyone is deeply mistaken and wants to make money. One of the policemen realized that that guy was clearly out of control and drastic measures should be taken. The security forces, taken with shields and in full ammunition, immediately began to emerge from the armored vehicle. This immediately caused fear in the boy, and he started to run away. The hero said that Fatty is clearly crazy. Then he lightly hit the naive friend, and so he lost consciousness. Ming caught the guy and started to carry him away safely. Soon he put him down and decided to explain that it was special police forces. The police were here, but he still has his head in the clouds. The guy started crying because his parents' savings were destroyed and he spent everything and didn't know what to do. Now, the protagonist turned to Fatty and said that he was still too young, and this time he made a mistake, but there is still a long way to go and there will be many chances. At this point, the protagonist left one last piece of advice. He told Fatty that when the police arrive, he should not resist. The friend wanted to know where the hero would go, but he had no answer. Sometime later, the ex-girlfriend and Ming were preparing to escape. The protagonist noticed that the girl had a lot of money and wouldn't be able to take it all. Faye says she prefers to go to jail than to run out of money. Watching the girl closely, the hero asked if she could do something different. After a while, they reached their destination. The girl got out of the car and started to approach a house. The protagonist, fearing a setup, decided to ask her to call her friend. The girl did not understand why. Meanwhile, an unknown man watched the couple and soon remembered that they agreed that the girl would be alone. The girl replied that it was true, and the unknown man told her to come in. The hospitable man immediately offered the girl a snack. The protagonist didn't want to refuse the meal and started eating. The guy watching Ming and concluded that the young man didn't look anything like a bodyguard, so he wanted to know how the young man with that body became a security guard. Ming questioned if the guy really had doubts. Then he called the man for a duel. The guy quickly pulled out a knife and pointed it at the main character with incredible ease. But Ming immediately reacted and managed to pin the guy to the table. The terrifying stranger realized that the hero was actually a bodyguard. At that moment, Ming turned to asking when the boat would arrive. The guy replied that he didn't say anything about letting him get on the boat, unless he went with one pig and got rid of the other. The protagonist, hearing this, had doubts as to why the guy called them pigs. He objected indignantly because they were people and he wouldn't eliminate people. The strange guy added that they signed a slave contract and are no longer people. Suddenly, the girl also added that she was not a saint and asked Ming not to think that he would give the money. The main character, analyzing the situation, thought if it was possible to do something different. Ming also added that no matter the way, he will not hurt innocent people to get on that boat. In a mocking tone, the man said that the naval patrol has been quite strict lately, and this is the last boat for this week. The boat was ready and was going to leave in half an hour. The man turns to the girl and says that she broke the agreement and brought someone. The girl asked him to stop talking nonsense and said he would pay double the price to get on board. The indignant man asked if she seriously thought that money solved everything.